don't leave us here.
We have to go. It's not safe.
We will come back for you, I promise.
Sarah Chen never imagined that standing outside a grocery store in downtown Toronto, 5 months pregnant, she'd come face to face with the man who shattered her world. The muddy water hit her stomach before she registered the sound of the engine. Cold. Filthy. Deliberate. Then she saw his face through the car window, that same face that once promised forever in a hospital room where their daughter took her first and last breath. That same face that couldn't be bothered to hold their dying baby. That same face now twisted in cruel amusement as sewage-tinged water soaked through her clothes, drenching the belly where a miracle doctors said was impossible was growing. Still shopping at discount stores like the poor, broken woman I left behind, Michael's voice cut through the rain. His eyes dropped to her pregnant stomach with pure contempt. Found someone desperate enough to knock you up? We both know your useless body will kill this one too. But Michael Hayes has no idea that the woman he just humiliated, his ex-wife he calls worthless and barren, is now Sarah Park, married to David Park, whose family controls the $8 billion empire that holds every contract keeping Michael's real estate business alive. He has no idea that in 3 weeks, when David's father announces on national television that Sarah is carrying his heir, Michael won't just lose his empire. He'll be destroyed while millions watch. Don't go anywhere, because what happens next will prove that karma doesn't just come for cruel men. It arrives in a billionaire's limousine, and the revenge is so perfectly calculated, it will leave you speechless. If you're already feeling the weight of Sarah's pain, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. This story gets more intense, but I promise you, justice is coming. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from, and let's continue this journey together. 7 years ago, Sarah Chen made a choice that would cost her everything she thought love was supposed to be. She was 23, standing in a small wedding venue in Vancouver, wearing a simple white dress her mother had sewn by hand. Michael Hayes, 29 and magnetic, slid a gold ring onto her finger with a whisper that made her heart race. "You're mine now." Sarah thought it sounded romantic. She didn't know yet that he meant it like ownership. Michael was building something ambitious. Hayes Properties, luxury condominiums across British Columbia, commercial buildings, developments that reshaped city skylines. Sarah was proud of him. She worked as a pediatric nurse at Toronto General Hospital, making $68,000 a year, coming home each evening to a man who was becoming someone important. The first year felt like a dream. Michael bought her things she never requested: designer handbags, expensive jewelry, clothes with price tags that made her uncomfortable. He took her to restaurants where she struggled to pronounce menu items. He introduced her as my wife, the nurse. And Sarah thought he was proud. She didn't hear the subtle dismissiveness. She didn't see the pitying smiles from his business associates. By the second year, cracks appeared like fractures in ice. Michael started criticizing her appearance. "You're a Hayes now, Sarah. You can't wear budget brands to charity dinners." He bought entire new wardrobes without asking her preference. He scheduled spa appointments without consulting her. He controlled her like she was another property he was developing. Sarah convinced herself it was love, that he wanted her to fit into his world, that she needed to adapt and grow. The third year, she got pregnant. Sarah cried happy tears when she saw the positive test. She imagined a little girl with Michael's dark hair and her brown eyes. They'd name her Lily. Michael seemed excited too, initially. He told his board members, handed out cigars, posted announcements on social media like it was a business milestone. But then the pregnancy became inconvenient. Sarah suffered severe morning sickness. Exhaustion consumed her. She couldn't attend business events. Michael grew frustrated. "You need to push through it, Sarah. I have investors depending on these dinners." At 6 months pregnant, Sarah was finishing her hospital shift when the cramping started. Sharp. Violent. Wrong. She called Michael 19 times. He was closing a $15 million deal and couldn't be interrupted. A colleague drove Sarah to the emergency room. Doctors tried everything, but baby Lily was born silent. 6 months developed, perfectly formed, gone. Sarah held her daughter's tiny body, screaming for Michael to come see their baby, to hold Lily just once. He arrived 9 hours later, still wearing his suit, smelling of whiskey and expensive cologne. He stood at the foot of the bed, uncomfortable, checking his phone. The doctor said these things happen, he said, like discussing a failed property inspection. We can try again. Sarah looked at him while cradling their dead daughter and felt something inside her die that wasn't the baby. Later, after Michael left to handle some calls, the doctor delivered news worse than losing Lily. Mrs. Hayes, I'm very sorry. There were complications. The trauma, the stress. Your uterus sustained significant damage. Your chances of carrying another pregnancy to term are extremely low. We estimate 5 to 7%. Sarah was 27 years old, being told her body was broken. When she told Michael, his response was 4 words. So you're basically barren. Not, I'm sorry. Not, we'll figure this out. Just that word, barren, like she was in fertile soil, worthless land, a failed investment. From that moment, Michael weaponized it. At dinner parties when people asked about children, we'd love to, but Sarah has complications. Said with just enough emphasis to make it sound like a character flaw. During arguments, maybe if you could give me a family, I'd have a reason to come home. To justify his affairs, I'm 32. I need an heir. You can't provide that. Sarah spent the next 2 years as a ghost in her own marriage. She attended therapy twice weekly, took medication for depression, worked a hospital shifts, and came home to a man who looked at her like she'd failed him fundamentally. Michael's affairs became impossible to ignore. Late nights smelling of unfamiliar perfume. Lipstick stains on shirt collars. A woman named Jessica started appearing at company events as his executive assistant. Everyone knew. Sarah knew. But she stayed because some damaged part of her believed Michael was right, that she was broken, that no one else would want her, that she deserved this punishment for failing to carry their daughter. Until the night she came home early from a hospital fundraiser and found Michael in their bed with Jessica. Both naked. Both laughing. Michael saw Sarah standing frozen in the doorway, and he didn't even pretend shame. He sat up casually, like she'd interrupted a business meeting. Maybe if you were more exciting, I wouldn't need to look elsewhere, he said. His next words cut deeper than any physical wound. And maybe if you weren't barren, I'd have a reason to stay faithful. Sarah packed a bag that night, hands shaking so violently she could barely zip it. She filed for divorce the next morning. Michael didn't fight it. Good, he said. I need someone who can actually give me a legacy. But Michael didn't let her go quietly. He told everyone, their friends, his business partners, their families, that Sarah was the one who cheated, that she destroyed their marriage, that she was unstable, broken, untrustworthy. He painted himself as the victim and Sarah as the villain. For 13 months after the divorce, Sarah believed him. Sarah was living in a modest apartment in Toronto's East End, barely affording rent on her nurse's salary, when her friend Maya dragged her to a charity event. You need to get out, Maya insisted. Meet people. This is a children's hospital fundraiser. It's perfect for you. Sarah almost refused. She'd spent 13 months rebuilding herself piece by piece, and the thought of being in a room full of strangers felt exhausting. But something made her say yes. Maybe the part of her that refused to let Michael's voice win. Maybe the nurse in her who couldn't resist anything involving children. She wore a simple navy dress, the first dress she'd bought herself in years. No one chose it for her. No one criticized it. It was hers. The gala was at a beautiful venue overlooking Lake Ontario, all soft lighting and elegant decorations. Sarah felt immediately out of place. Everyone looked expensive, important, like they belonged in rooms like this. She was about to leave when she saw a man in a plain dark suit helping staff set up chairs near the back. He wasn't barking orders or checking his phone. He was just helping. Sarah walked over. Do you need a hand? The man looked up and smiled, genuine, warm, the kind of smile that reaches the eyes. I'd love one. Actually, I'm terrible at making these rows straight. They worked in silence for a few minutes, then he said, I'm David, by the way. Sarah. So Sarah, what brings you here tonight? She expected the usual small talk, job titles, social positioning, the questions that felt like additions. But David didn't ask any of that. Instead, what's the most rewarding part of being a nurse? Just like that, they spent 2 hours talking about pediatric care, about the magic of watching sick children recover, about how healthcare could transform communities. David listened like her words mattered, like she mattered. Not because of who she was married to or what she could provide, just because of who she was. When he asked for her number, Sarah hesitated. Her hand instinctively went to her stomach, a habit she developed after the miscarriage, like protecting a wound that never healed. I'm not really ready for just coffee, David interrupted gently. As friends who both think pediatric care doesn't get enough funding. Sarah laughed, really laughed, for the first time in over a year. They met for coffee 3 days later, then dinner, then long walks through Hyde Park where David talked about his work in family business operations, but never elaborated. Sarah assumed he worked for some corporate firm. She didn't care. He was kind, patient. He never pushed, never demanded. When Sarah told him about her divorce, David didn't pry. When she cried telling him about Lily, about the miscarriage, about being told she was barren, David held her hand across the table and said nothing, because nothing needed to be said. 4 months into dating, David took Sarah to meet his father. There's something I need to tell you first, he said. Sarah's stomach dropped. Here it comes, she thought. He's married. He's moving. He doesn't want this. My last name is Park, David said quietly. David Park. My father is James Park. The name hit Sarah like ice water. James Park. The James Park. Billionaire. Owner of Park Global Industries. $8 billion empire. Manufacturing, real estate, technology holdings across North America. Buildings with his name on them. Government contracts. One of the most powerful families in Canada. Sarah stood up so fast she nearly knocked over her chair. Why didn't you tell me? Because I wanted you to know me. Not my last name. Not my father's money. David's voice cracked. Does that change things? Sarah thought about Michael, who led with his money, his status, his achievements. Who made certain everyone knew exactly how successful he was. Then she looked at David, who'd spent 4 months helping arrange chairs, talking about healthcare, holding her when she cried, never once mentioning his family controlled an empire. No, she said. It doesn't change anything. They were engaged 4 months later. The wedding was intimate. 50 people, mostly family. Sarah wore a dress she chose herself. James Park insisted on walking her down the aisle because her father had died when she was 20. You're my daughter now, James said, voice thick with emotion. Not my daughter-in-law. My daughter. Michael Hayes never knew it happened. Sarah had blocked him everywhere, moved on completely. When Sarah became Sarah Park, her life transformed overnight. Security details. Media attention. Invitations to events at government buildings. But Sarah didn't change. She kept nursing, kept volunteering. The children at Toronto General Hospital didn't care that their favorite nurse was now married to a billionaire's son. They just cared that Nurse Sarah always had the best stories and gave the best hugs. 4 months into the marriage, Sarah felt nauseous during a morning shift. She excused herself to the staff bathroom and took a pregnancy test she'd been carrying in her bag for a week, too terrified to use. 2 lines. Positive. Sarah's hands shook so violently she dropped the test. She slid down the bathroom wall and cried, not from joy, not yet, but from terror. Because doctors had told her this would never happen. Because she'd been told her body was too broken, too damaged, too traumatized to carry life. Because some part of her still believed Michael's voice. You'll kill this one too. She called David from the bathroom floor. I need you to come get me. 20 minutes later, David was there. Sarah showed him the test, unable to speak. David's face cycled through a dozen emotions: shock, fear, hope, determination, before settling on something fierce and protective. He knelt on the bathroom floor and took Sarah's face in his hands. "We're going to do this together. Every appointment, every moment, every fear. You're not alone." At 4 months, doctors confirmed it. The pregnancy was healthy, stable. "Miraculous," one doctor said. At 5 months, Sarah's bump started showing. She told her young patients she was going to be a mommy. They made her cards covered in glitter and misspelled words. Sarah cried happy tears. James Park was overjoyed, his first grandchild, an heir to everything he'd built. He hosted a small family dinner to celebrate. When he toasted Sarah, he said something that made her cry all over again. "You've given this family something we didn't know we were missing. Not an heir, not a legacy, but hope. You've shown us that broken things can heal. That love is stronger than pain. That the best things in life aren't bought, they're built by people who refuse to give up." Sarah was 5 months pregnant, glowing with happiness she thought she'd never feel, when she decided to visit her mother in her old Toronto neighborhood. She needed to pick up some things. The cravings were getting specific. She stopped at a discount grocery store, the same one she'd shopped at for years. Wore comfortable maternity jeans and a loose sweater. Hair in a messy bun, no makeup, no security detail for once. She'd convinced David she just needed an hour to feel normal. She was crossing the street, grocery bags in hand, one hand protectively on her bump, when she heard the engine rev. A black Mercedes accelerated toward a massive puddle right beside her. Sarah barely had time to process it before impact. A tsunami of muddy water, freezing, violent, exploded over her body. It soaked her completely, covered her face, drenched her pregnant belly, ruined her groceries. Sarah stood there dripping, shocked, hands instinctively covering her stomach. The Mercedes stopped. The window rolled down. And Sarah saw him. Michael. That face. Those eyes. That smile Sarah once thought was charming but now recognized as cruel. "Oh my God, Sarah, is that you?" Michael's voice dripped with delight, with victory. He was laughing, actually laughing. Jessica sat in the passenger seat, designer sunglasses reflecting Sarah's humiliation. She giggled. "Michael, you're terrible. Is that really your ex-wife?" "In the flesh," Michael said, looking Sarah up and down like she was roadkill. Still shopping at discount stores. Still living that budget life. Some things never change, huh? Sarah couldn't speak, couldn't move. She just stood there, 5 months pregnant, covered in filthy water, staring at the man who destroyed her. Michael's eyes landed on her stomach. His smile widened, sharp, vindictive. "Wait, are you pregnant?" Sarah's hands shook. She said nothing. Michael's laughter turned vicious. "Oh my God, Jessica, look. Some desperate fool actually knocked up my barren ex-wife." He leaned further out the window, voice dropping to something designed to hurt. "We both know your useless body can't carry a child, Sarah. You'll kill this one too, just like you killed ours. What idiot agreed to get you pregnant? Does he know you're defective?" The words hit Sarah like physical blows. Her vision blurred, not from muddy water, but from memories flooding back. The hospital room. Lily's tiny body. Michael's voice saying, "These things happen." The doctor saying, "Barren." The years of believing she deserved this. Michael revved his engine. "You know, I always wondered what happened to you after the divorce. Guess you're still exactly where I left you, struggling through life, poor and pathetic, pretending you're not broken." Jessica's laughter mixed with the sound of traffic. "Michael, she looks miserable enough already." "Does she?" Michael grinned wider. "I think she looks exactly like what she is. Ordinary, a failure, a woman nobody wanted until some desperate man settled." He caught Sarah's eyes one last time. "Good luck keeping that baby alive, Sarah. We both know how that story ends." The Mercedes sped off, engine roaring, leaving Sarah standing in a puddle of filthy water, groceries destroyed, dignity shattered. 5 months pregnant and covered in mud that smelled like sewage and oil. People on the street stared, some concerned, some uncomfortable. One teenager had their phone out, filming. Sarah's hands trembled as she pulled out her phone. The screen was wet. Her fingers left muddy prints. She dialed David's number. He answered on the first ring. "Hey, love. How's? Can you pick me up?" Sarah's voice cracked. Something happened. 20 minutes later, a black SUV with tinted windows pulled up. 2 security personnel stepped out first, scanning the area like they were protecting royalty. Then David emerged. The moment he saw Sarah, covered in mud, shaking, crying, hands protectively on her pregnant stomach, his face went from concern to something cold and lethal. He wrapped his coat around her shoulders, guided her into the vehicle's heated interior, and Sarah told him everything. Every word. Every laugh. The comment about killing this baby too. David's jaw clenched so tightly Sarah could hear his teeth grind. His hands were gentle on her face, but his eyes were murder. "Do you know who did this?" "My ex-husband. Michael Hayes." David helped her settle into the seat and spoke quietly to his security team. "Get me everything on Michael Hayes. Everything. Business holdings, contracts, debts, partners, affairs. And find that video." Within 2 hours, the video had gone viral. Businessman splashes mud on pregnant woman. 20 million views. The comments were vicious. "Who does this to a pregnant woman? That's someone's wife. This man is a psychopath." Then someone recognized Sarah from a charity event photo. "Wait, that's Sarah Park, the billionaire's daughter-in-law." The story detonated across every news outlet in Canada. Real estate developer humiliates billionaire's pregnant daughter-in-law. Michael's phone exploded with calls. His PR team, his lawyers, his board members, all panicking. By the next morning, Michael received a call he'd never forget. The provincial government. Not a request, a command. All government contracts under immediate review. Ethics violations. $240 million frozen. Michael tried calling his government contacts. No one answered. What Michael didn't know, James Park had made 4 phone calls. That's all it took. Within 48 hours, 3 major banks called in $45 million in loans. Michael's stock crashed 58% in one day. His board voted him out as CEO. But the real destruction was still coming. 3 weeks after the incident, James Park stood before 300 of Canada's most powerful people at a charity gala broadcast live on CBC. Sarah stood beside David, glowing in an emerald gown that perfectly displayed her 6-month bump. The cameras loved her, the nurse who married into power but stayed humble, who still volunteered at children's hospitals, whose genuine warmth made her Canada's sweetheart. "Tonight," James said, his voice filling the grand ballroom, "I'm honored to announce that my daughter-in-law Sarah is carrying my first grandchild, the heir to the Park family legacy." The room erupted in applause. Cameras flashed. The live stream viewer count hit 12 million. But James wasn't finished. "This child represents everything my family values: compassion, integrity, respect. Which is why I want to be clear." His voice dropped, taking on an edge that made the room go silent. "Anyone who disrespects my family, who would harm my daughter or endanger her child, will face the full consequences of their actions." Everyone in the room knew exactly who he was talking about. The business community wasn't stupid. The viral video had made Michael Hayes infamous. And now Canada's most powerful billionaire had just declared war on him in front of millions of witnesses. Michael sat alone in his half-empty condo, soon to be seized by banks, and watched his ex-wife, the woman he called barren and worthless, standing in a room filled with the most powerful people in Canada, carrying the Park heir. Loved. Protected. Radiant. His phone buzzed with notifications. Not opportunities. Terminations. All his government contracts. Cancelled permanently. Ethics violations. Conduct unbecoming. His largest private investors. Pulling out. Reputational concerns. His banking relationships. Loans called in. Risk management. Within 72 hours, Michael Hayes lost everything. Hayes Properties was sold to a competitor for 30 cents on the dollar. His luxury condo was foreclosed. His Mercedes was repossessed. Jessica left him for a hedge fund manager she met at a business dinner. Michael Blackwell, once worth $35 million, now works as a real estate consultant making $52,000 a year, living in a modest apartment in suburban Toronto. Meanwhile, Sarah Park became one of Canada's most beloved public figures. A nurse who married into wealth but never forgot where she came from. Whose charity work transformed pediatric healthcare across the province. Whose son, James David Park, was born healthy and perfect 3 months later. The hospital where Sarah worked threw her a surprise baby shower. 60 nurses, doctors, and young patients filled the cafeteria with decorations they'd made themselves. No expensive gifts, just cards, drawings, handmade blankets. Sarah cried through the entire celebration. This, she told David that night, means more than any fancy party ever could. When baby James was born, weighing 7 pounds and 5 ounces, crying with healthy lungs, Sarah held him against her chest and sobbed. Not from pain or fear or trauma, but from overwhelming joy and relief. "We did it," David whispered, tears streaming down his face. "You did it." James Park held his grandson for the first time and couldn't speak for 5 minutes. He just stood there, this powerful billionaire who commanded boardrooms and influenced governments, reduced to tears by a tiny baby. "Thank you," he finally said to Sarah. "Thank you for giving this old man something he thought he'd never have." Sarah's mother, who'd sewn her first wedding dress by hand, now sat in a private hospital suite holding her grandson. "Your father would be so proud of you," she told Sarah. "Not because you married wealth, but because you never let cruelty break you." Michael heard about the birth through social media. Saw the photos of Sarah glowing with happiness, David holding his son with fierce protection, James Park beaming like he'd been given the world. He typed out a message to Sarah's old number, not realizing she'd blocked him years ago. "I'm sorry for everything. I was wrong. You deserved better. Congratulations on your son." The message never delivered. Sarah never knew he tried to reach out. And honestly, it wouldn't have mattered. Because Sarah had moved so far beyond Michael Hayes that he existed only as a cautionary tale she sometimes shared with young nurses struggling through toxic relationships. "I once believed someone who told me I was broken. I let him convince me I was worthless. But broken things can heal. Damaged things can grow. And sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's building a life so beautiful that the person who hurt you becomes irrelevant." 3 months after James was born, Sarah returned to work part-time. Her first day back, the children's ward threw her a welcome back party. A 4-year-old cancer patient named Emma gave her a drawing of a nurse with a baby. "That's you and baby James," Emma said. "You're my favorite nurse because you're nice and you understand when things hurt." 5 years after the muddy water incident that destroyed his life, Michael Hayes walked into a small coffee shop in downtown Toronto. He was meeting a potential client, trying to rebuild his consulting business one small deal at a time. The years had not been kind to him. His hairline had receded. His face looked older than his 39 years. He wore an off-the-rack suit that fit poorly. The confidence that once made him magnetic had been replaced by something hollow. Michael ordered a regular coffee, black, no additions. He couldn't afford the fancy drinks anymore. As he waited, he noticed a woman at a corner table reading to a small boy. The child was maybe 4 years old, with dark hair and bright eyes, completely engrossed in the story about dinosaurs. Michael's heart stopped. It was Sarah. She looked different, not older, but fuller, like someone who'd grown into themselves. Her hair was longer. She wore comfortable jeans and a simple sweater. No designer labels. No jewelry except a wedding ring that looked modest but was probably worth more than his annual salary. The little boy, James, Michael realized, looked up at his mother with pure adoration. Mama, read the part about the T-Rex again. Sarah laughed, the kind of genuine laugh Michael had never heard from her during their marriage. Again? We've read it 3 times already. Please. James used every ounce of 4-year-old charm. Okay, but then we need to get groceries for Grandma. Michael should have left. Should have walked out before she saw him. But he was frozen, watching this scene of domestic happiness, the life he'd thrown away. Then David walked in, carrying what looked like art supplies. He kissed Sarah's forehead and ruffled James's hair. Got the markers for his school project. Did I miss story time? Just finished. Your son has decided he's going to be a paleontologist. Better than last week when he wanted to be a superhero astronaut firefighter. They laughed together, this easy partnership that made Michael's chest ache. That's when Sarah looked up and saw him. For a moment, neither of them moved. 5 years of history hung in the air between them. Then Sarah did something Michael never expected. She smiled, not cruel or vindictive, but almost pitying. She said something to David, who immediately looked over and positioned himself slightly in front of James. Protective but not aggressive. Sarah stood and walked over to Michael. Up close, he could see the happiness in her eyes, the kind that comes from genuine contentment, not performance. Hello, Michael. Sarah. His voice cracked. I wanted to say. You don't need to. Her voice was gentle but firm. What's done is done. I was wrong. About everything. The things I said, the way I treated you. You weren't broken. I was. Sarah studied him for a moment. I know. I see you're happy now. I am. Very. Michael glanced at James, who was now showing David a drawing. He's beautiful. Your son. He is. Sarah's hand went instinctively to her stomach, that protective gesture Michael remembered. And I'm pregnant again. 3 months. The words hit him like a physical blow. Not from jealousy, he'd lost that right years ago, but from the weight of his own cruelty. All those times he'd called her barren. All those times he'd blamed her for their loss. Sarah, I'm so sorry. For Lily. For everything. I should have been there. I should have held her. I should have held you. For the first time, Sarah's expression softened with something like forgiveness. We both lost her, Michael. But we grieved differently. You ran from the pain. I lived through it. I destroyed us. No, Sarah said quietly. You destroyed yourself. We were already broken. I just finally found the courage to leave. David had walked over now, James holding his hand. He didn't say anything threatening, but his presence made it clear. This conversation had a time limit. I should go, Michael said. I hope everything continues to go well for you. Thank you. Sarah paused, then added, Michael, I hope you find peace. Real peace. Not through money or status or relationships, but within yourself. Everyone deserves that. It was the kindest thing anyone had said to him in 5 years. Michael nodded, unable to speak, and walked out of the coffee shop. As the door closed behind him, he heard James ask, Mama, who was that man? Someone I used to know, sweetheart. A long time ago. Did he make you sad? Once. But not anymore. After leaving the coffee shop, Michael walked for hours through Toronto's streets. He ended up at Queen's Park, sitting on the same bench where he'd once closed a major deal, feeling on top of the world. Now he felt hollow. His phone buzzed. A message from his therapist. Yes, Michael had finally started therapy 2 years ago after his 3rd failed relationship and a near breakdown. Remember, healing isn't about the destination. It's about showing up for yourself every day, even when it's hard. Michael had been in therapy for 3 years now. It started court-ordered after the incident. Anger management, they called it. But he'd continued voluntarily because for the first time in his life, someone was making him examine why he'd become so cruel. The answers weren't comfortable. His therapist helped him understand that he'd treated Sarah like property because his father had treated his mother the same way. That he'd used cruelty as control because he felt powerless in other areas of his life. That he'd blamed Sarah for Lily's death because accepting that sometimes tragedy just happens was too painful. None of this excused what he'd done. Michael knew that. But understanding helped him stop doing it to others. These days, Michael lived simply. His apartment was small but clean. His consulting work was modest but honest. He'd started volunteering at a men's support group for divorced fathers struggling with anger and regret. Last month, he'd helped a young guy named Chris who was going through a bitter divorce. Chris had come to the meeting talking about his ex-wife the way Michael once talked about Sarah, like she was the source of all his problems. Michael pulled him aside after. "Let me tell you what happens when you go down that road. You lose everything. And I don't mean money or status, I mean yourself. The person you could have been." He told Chris his story. All of it. The cruelty, the affairs, the moment he splashed mud on his pregnant ex-wife. The empire he lost, the reputation destroyed. "But here's the thing," Michael said. "I deserved to lose it all. Because I'd become someone who could do that to another human being. Someone who could cause pain and call it justified." Chris had tears in his eyes. "How do you live with it? The guilt. You don't live with it. You live through it. You acknowledge what you did was wrong. You genuinely change. You help others avoid your mistakes. And you accept that some people will never forgive you, and that's their right." Now, sitting on that park bench, Michael thought about Sarah's words. "I hope you find peace." He hadn't. Not yet. Maybe he never would. But he was trying. His current relationship was with a woman named Rachel, a social worker who knew his whole history before they started dating. "I don't need you to be perfect," she told him. "I need you to be honest and actively working on yourself." Their relationship was different than anything Michael had known. They communicated. They went to couples therapy proactively, not as a last resort. When they fought fair. No name-calling, no cruelty, no weaponizing each other's vulnerabilities. It wasn't passionate like his relationship with Sarah had been at the start. It was something steadier. Something real. Michael's phone buzzed again. "Rachel. Still on for dinner? I'm making that pasta you like." He smiled. Small moments like this, someone making him dinner, someone who chose to be with him knowing everything he'd done wrong, these felt like more than he deserved. "On my way home," he texted back. As Michael stood to leave the park, he saw a young couple arguing nearby. The man was raising his voice, getting in the woman's space. She looked scared. Old Michael would have walked past. Current Michael walked over. "Hey," he said calmly to the man. "Take a breath. Whatever's going on, this isn't the way." The man turned on him. "Min. Your business. I'm making it my business because I've been where you are. Angry, out of control, taking it out on someone who doesn't deserve it. It doesn't end well. Trust me." Something in Michael's voice, the authenticity of someone who'd lived through consequences, made the man pause. The woman took the opportunity to step away. "You don't know anything about me," the man said, but his voice had lost its edge. "You're right. But I know that whatever you're about to do, you can't take it back. And you'll spend years wishing you could." The man stared at Michael for a long moment, then walked away in the opposite direction. The woman mouthed, "Thank you," to Michael before quickly leaving. Michael continued walking home, thinking, maybe this is how you find peace. Not through grand gestures or public redemption, but through small moments of choosing better. That evening, after putting James to bed, Sarah sat with David on their living room couch. She'd been quiet since the coffee shop encounter, processing emotions she thought she'd completely resolved. "Want to talk about it?" David asked, pulling her close. Seeing Michael today, it didn't hurt the way I thought it would. It just felt sad. Sad how? Sarah took a moment to gather her thoughts. Sad that he wasted so much of his life being cruel. Sad that it took losing everything for him to maybe, become a better person. Sad that some people only learn through destruction. David kissed the top of her head. You're allowed to feel however you feel about him. I don't hate him anymore. I haven't for years. But I also don't need to forgive him in the way people think forgiveness should look. Does that make sense? Perfect sense. Sarah shifted to look at David. I spent years in therapy working through what Michael did to me. Understanding that his cruelty wasn't about my worth. It was about his brokenness. That helped me heal. But healing doesn't mean I have to welcome him back into my life or absolve him of accountability. You can acknowledge someone's humanity without giving them access to hurt you again, David said. Exactly. Sarah smiled. When did you get so wise? I married you, didn't I? That was pretty wise. Sarah laughed, then grew serious again. You know what the therapist helped me understand? That Michael's worst crime wasn't the affairs or the cruelty or even splashing mud on me that day. What was it? He tried to convince me his voice was the truth. That I was broken, barren, worthless. And for years I believed him. That's what almost destroyed me. Not what he did, but what I let his words make me believe about myself. David's arms tightened around her. And now I know my worth isn't determined by someone else's ability to see it. I'm not broken. I was wounded, and wounds heal. I'm not barren. I have James and this little one. She placed her hand on her small bump. And even if I never had biological children, my worth isn't tied to my uterus. You've come so far, David said softly. We both have. You helped me see that love doesn't have to hurt. That partnership means actually being partners. That I'm allowed to take up space and have needs and expect to be treated with respect. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment before Sarah continued. Seeing Michael today reminded me how far I've come. 5 years ago, that encounter would have devastated me. I would have spiraled, convinced myself he was right, that I was only happy because of luck or David's money or anything except my own resilience. And now I know the truth. I survived him. I rebuilt myself. I chose to love again even when I was terrified. I carried James when doctors said I couldn't. I'm building a life that's mine, not defined by someone else's cruelty or someone else's wealth, but by my choices and my values. David pulled back to look at her. You're extraordinary, you know that? I'm ordinary. That's what makes this whole story important. Sarah's eyes were intense now. I'm not special or superhuman. I'm just someone who refused to let cruelty have the last word. And if I can do it, anyone can. Is that why you volunteer to speak at those women's support groups? Sarah nodded. Because there are so many women stuck where I was, believing they're broken, that they deserve mistreatment, that leaving means failure. I need them to know, leaving sometimes means choosing yourself. And that's not failure, that's courage. James's voice called from his bedroom. Mama, I had a bad dream. Sarah stood to go comfort him, then paused. You know what the funny thing is? Michael probably thinks his biggest punishment was losing his money and status. But that's not it. What is it then? His biggest punishment is living with the knowledge of who he became. Money can be rebuilt. Reputation can recover. But knowing you were capable of that level of cruelty to someone who loved you? That's something you carry forever. She walked toward James's room, then turned back one more time. And you know what my biggest victory is? It's not that I married into wealth or that karma got him or any of that. It's that I'm genuinely happy. Not happy because he's suffering. Happy despite what he did. That's the real revenge. Building a joy he can't touch. David watched his wife comfort their son, her voice soft and patient, and thought, Michael Hayes lost the most valuable thing he ever had, and he'll spend the rest of his life knowing it. 2 years later, Sarah stood in front of 300 women at a conference about recovering from emotional abuse. She was 7 months pregnant with her second child, a daughter they were naming Lily. Naming their daughter after the baby she'd lost had been Sarah's idea. "I don't want to forget her," she told David. "I want to honor her memory by giving our daughter her name. Is that okay?" David had cried. "It's perfect." Now, standing on that stage with Lily moving inside her, Sarah shared her story. Not for revenge or attention, but because her therapist had helped her understand that her story could help others. "I want to be clear about something," Sarah told the audience. "This isn't a revenge story. This isn't about watching a cruel man fall and finding satisfaction in his suffering. This is about reclaiming your narrative when someone tries to write you as the villain in your own life." She shared the hospital room where baby Lily died. The years of being called barren. The affairs, the gaslighting, the moment Michael splashed mud on her pregnant body. But she also shared the harder truths. "I stayed longer than I should have because I believed I deserved it. I let his voice become my internal dialogue. I looked in the mirror and saw what he told me I was, not who I actually was." Women in the audience were crying. Some were nodding. All were listening. "The day I left wasn't the day I found strength," Sarah continued. "It was the day I finally decided I was tired of being afraid. There's a difference. Strength came later, slowly, through therapy, through learning to trust again, through choosing to believe I was worthy of love." She paused, placing a hand on her belly. "I'm not here to tell you that leaving guarantees a fairy tale ending. I'm here to tell you that leaving guarantees something better. Yourself. Your dignity. Your chance to discover who you are when you're not constantly managing someone else's cruelty." After the speech, dozens of women lined up to talk to Sarah. One woman, maybe 25 years old, waited until everyone else had left. "Mrs. Park, I need to tell you something." The woman was shaking. "I'm engaged to someone who treats me like your ex-husband treated you. Everyone says I'm lucky. He's successful, handsome, comes from a good family. But he calls me stupid. He controls what I wear. He comments on my weight. And I keep thinking maybe after we're married, it'll get better." Sarah took the woman's hands. "What's your name?" "Amanda." "Amanda, listen to me very carefully. It won't get better after marriage. Marriage doesn't fix cruelty. It gives it a legal contract. The way he treats you now is the best it will ever be. It only gets worse from here." Amanda's tears fell freely now. "But I've already sent the invitations. My family loves him. What will people think?" "Amanda, I wore a wedding dress my mother made by hand and married a man who would spend the next 5 years destroying me piece by piece. Do you know what I wish someone had told me?" "What?" "That it's better to be embarrassed for canceling a wedding than to spend years being humiliated in a marriage. That people's opinions last a moment, but trauma lasts a lifetime if you let it. That you are allowed to change your mind, even at the last second." Amanda sobbed. "I'm so scared." "I know. I was too. But you know what's scarier? Waking up 5 years from now, maybe with a child, definitely with less courage, wondering why you didn't leave when you saw the red flags clearly." Sarah pulled a card from her purse. "This is my personal number. You call me if you need support leaving. Day or night. I will help you. Because someone helped me, and now I'm paying it forward." Amanda clutched the card like a lifeline. "Thank you. Thank you so much." 3 weeks later, Sarah received a text from an unknown number. "This is Amanda from the conference. I called off the wedding. I'm terrified but I'm free. Thank you for saving my life." Sarah showed David the message. "This," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "This is why I tell the story. Not for revenge against Michael, but to be the voice I needed when I was trapped." That night, Sarah couldn't sleep. Lily was active, kicking against her ribs. She went to the nursery they'd prepared. Soft pink walls, shelves full of books, a rocking chair by the window. She placed both hands on her belly and whispered, "Your name honors a baby who didn't get to live, but whose short life taught me that love is worth the risk of loss. You're going to grow up knowing you're valued for who you are, not what you can give someone else. You're going to see your father treat your mother with respect and know that's the minimum you should accept." Lily Rose Park was born on a Tuesday morning in April, weighing 6 pounds and 11 ounces, with her mother's eyes and her father's dark hair. She came into the world screaming, healthy, perfect, alive. Sarah held her daughter against her chest and felt something inside her heal that she didn't even realize still needed healing. This wasn't replacing the first Lily. This was honoring her memory by refusing to let fear win. "Hello, my beautiful girl," Sarah whispered. "Your big brother is so excited to meet you. And your big sister is watching over you from heaven." David stood beside the hospital bed, tears streaming down his face, holding James, who kept asking, "Can I hold her? Please, can I hold her?" They let him, carefully supervised, and James looked down at his tiny sister with such fierce protectiveness that Sarah and David both cried. "I'm going to teach her everything," James announced seriously. "About dinosaurs and superheroes and how to be brave." "I think she's going to teach you some things too," David said softly. The hospital room filled with family over the next few hours. Sarah's mother, who'd sewn her first wedding dress and witnessed her lowest moments, held her granddaughter and said, "Your father would be so proud of you. Not because you survived, but because you chose to thrive." James Park held his granddaughter with the tenderness of someone who'd waited 72 years for this moment. "2 grandchildren," he said, his voice breaking. "2 miracles. Sarah, you've given this old man more joy than I thought possible." The nurses who'd taken care of Sarah throughout her pregnancy stopped by with a card signed by the entire staff. "Congratulations on your beautiful daughter. Thank you for reminding us why we do this job." 3 days later, Sarah brought Lily home. The house was filled with flowers, cards, and gifts, but the most meaningful was a drawing from her Year 2 class at the hospital where she still volunteered. 30 children had drawn pictures of baby Lily before ever meeting her. One child had written, "Mrs. Sarah, your baby is lucky because you're the nicest mommy in the world." That evening, after James was asleep and Lily was nursing peacefully, David asked Sarah the question that had been on his mind. "Do you ever wonder what Michael thinks? Knowing you have everything he said you couldn't have." Sarah looked down at her daughter, then back at her husband. "Honestly, I don't. Not anymore. Michael's opinion stopped mattering the day I realized his cruelty was about his brokenness, not my worth. No curiosity at all. Maybe 5 years ago, I would have wanted him to know. Wanted him to see what he lost, what he was wrong about. But now..." Sarah shook her head. "Now I understand that living well isn't about proving anything to people who hurt you. It's about building a life so full of love that their voice gets drowned out completely." 2 months later, Sarah was at a bookstore with both kids when she saw him. Michael was in the parenting section, holding a book about communication with children. He looked different, softer somehow, less sharp around the edges. He hadn't seen her yet. Sarah could have left. Could have avoided the encounter entirely. Instead, she made a choice. "Hello, Michael." He turned, and his face went through several emotions. Surprise, shame, sadness. His eyes landed on Lily in Sarah's arms and James holding her hand. "Sarah. He stopped, seeming to realize anything he said would be inadequate. "Is that a parenting book?" Sarah asked gently. "Yeah. My girlfriend, Rachel. She has a daughter from a previous marriage. I'm trying to do better. Be better." "That's good, Michael. Really." An awkward silence stretched between them. Then Michael said, "Your daughter is beautiful. Both your children are beautiful." "Thank you. Sarah, I know I have no right to say this, but..." "Then don't." Sarah's voice wasn't cruel, just firm. "We don't need to do this. You're working on yourself. That's good. I hope you keep doing it. But we don't need closure or big emotional moments. We're just two people who used to know each other, and now we don't. And that's okay. Michael nodded, tears in his eyes. You're happy. I'm happy. That's all I wanted to say. That I'm glad you're happy. Even though I have no right to be glad or not glad about your life anymore. Sarah smiled, genuinely, without malice. Then I'll accept that and move on. Take care, Michael. As she walked away with her children, James tugged her hand. Mama, was that the sad man from before? It was, baby. Is he still sad? Sarah looked back once. Michael was standing there, watching them leave, and yes, he still looked sad. But it was a different kind of sad. Not bitter or angry, but something almost like peace with regret. I think he's less sad than before, Sarah told her son. And that's good enough. That night, Sarah wrote in the journal she kept for her children, letters they'd read when they were older. Dear James and Lily, if you're reading this, you're old enough to understand that life sometimes breaks people. Your mother was broken once. Not by a single moment, but by years of being told she wasn't enough. I'm writing this to tell you that broken things can heal. That people who hurt you don't get to define your worth. That leaving someone who treats you poorly isn't failure. It's courage. Your father taught me that love shouldn't hurt. That partnership means actually being partners. That you're allowed to take up space and have needs and expect respect. You both taught me that miracles happen when doctors say they won't. That life finds a way even after trauma tries to destroy it. That joy is possible after grief. And most importantly, the person who splashed mud on me, who called me worthless, who tried to destroy my spirit, he didn't win. Not because he was punished or because I got revenge, but because I chose to keep living. To keep loving. To keep believing I deserved better. That's the real victory. Not wealth or status or public vindication, but waking up every day and choosing yourself. If someone ever makes you feel small, remember. You came from someone who was told she was broken and chose to believe she could heal instead. You came from love that refused to give up, even when it would have been easier to stay afraid. That's your legacy. Not money or name or power, but resilience. The knowledge that you can survive hard things and come out whole on the other side. I love you both more than words can express. Mama. Sarah closed the journal and looked at David, who was reading to James while Lily slept in her bassinet. This was the revenge Michael never understood. A life so full of love that his cruelty became irrelevant. A story that ended not with his destruction, but with her joy. And in the end, that was always the most powerful ending. Final message to you. Thank you for joining Sarah on this incredible journey from trauma to triumph, from brokenness to healing, from being told she was worthless to knowing her infinite worth. This story wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming your narrative when someone tries to write you as the villain in your own life. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to this channel and hit that notification bell so you never miss stories about resilience, redemption, and the power of choosing yourself like this video. If you believe broken things can heal, comment below and tell me. Where are you watching from? What part of Sarah's story resonated most with you? Share this with someone who needs to hear that they deserve better, that leaving isn't failure, and that their worth isn't determined by someone else's ability to see it. The Bible says in Galatians 6 verse 7, "Do not be deceived, God cannot be mocked. A person reaps what they sow." Michael sowed cruelty and reaped loss. Sarah sowed resilience and reaped joy. Remember, your value doesn't decrease based on someone's inability to see your worth. You are allowed to leave toxic situations. You are allowed to choose yourself. And you are allowed to build a life so beautiful that the people who hurt you become irrelevant. God bless you, and I'll see you in the next story.